Good morning good morning good morning once again, and welcome to the Tuesday, February 21st edition of the OBX Wave Report for Real Freedom and Democracy, where we talk all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. And today we're also going to do a little talk about politics. Um, we've got a lot to talk about on the OBX Wave Report today. First off, I am back in the gorgeous Outer Banks right here on the edge of climate crisis. And, they say that here in the Outer Banks, we were first in flight or first in freedom. Well, we're gonna make that real. We're gonna talk about real freedom, which is liberation from tyrants and liberation from the yoke of harmful fossil fuels and liberation from cynical messaging that shames those that promote justice and good action. So, for our start in the wave report today, and we're going to get to waves, we're going to get to weather. There's just so much going on right now. But for the start of the wave report, let's start off with a little story. I did talk a little bit about this yesterday as I was remembering the good work of Jimmy Carter in clean energy on President's Day. But I want to talk about the center of gravity right now and this global conflict that surrounds both democracy versus dictatorship and tyranny, and clean energy versus the old harmful fuels, fossil fuels. And the two are related. And I touched on this yesterday, but this is, I think, a message that needs to be driven home again and again and again. Fossil fuels are a finite source of energy. And because they are finite, it is easy for bad actors to corner the market on fossil fuels and to drive up prices and to thereby drive global inflation. And if you're driving global inflation, you're also driving instability, extremism, and fear around the world. So the ability to corner the market on fossil fuels is enabled by its finite quality. And often it has thus been a tool of bad actors across the world, a tool of leverage in, I guess, the way gangsters might leverage, any kind of desirable commodity. And we saw this in the 1970s when the OPEC countries cornered the market on fossil fuels and drove up prices for the West, setting off this massive spiral of inflation and then stagflation. When you have inflation, rising prices, and economic growth stagnating or falling. And this created major jarring in the West, major insecurity that I think harmed Western politics for decades. And the way out of that fix, there I guess, a number of different ways to get out of that fix. But the main way, that the center of gravity, the key to get out of that fix, is to remove the reliance on fossil fuels and instead have democratized energy sources that enable energy independence, to throw off leverage by bad actors. And in this case, lately, this has become kind of an anti-democracy leverage, but we'll get into that. Jimmy Carter started that process by throwing research and development into wind, solar, water, high efficiency, and this also later led to electric vehicles. Now, fast forward to the present day, And we have basically history rhyming with itself. We had a Ukraine invasion, Russia trying to use fossil fuels as leverage against both the Europe and the West. And because of the Ukraine invasion and this leveraging, we had a big spike in inflation. I'm just going to pull this quote from Martin Heinrich from New Mexico, um, saying 41% of the inflation Americans are feeling is directly tied to volatile fossil fuel prices. We need to connect the dots here. Breaking free from our fossil fuel addiction is how we deliver families much needed relief in their monthly budgets. And how do you break the fossil fuel addiction? You mass deploy clean energy. You mass deploy wind, water, solar. Um, Now, the United States might be feeling this inflationary pressure, but it's much worse in Europe. And right now, there are nations in Europe that are feeling the pressure of extremism fanned by inflation and Russian propaganda right now, aimed at Europe, aimed at destabilizing Europe, aimed at weakening the will of Europe to support Ukraine. And bravely, yesterday, President Joe Biden went to Ukraine and stood up for the Ukrainian people in this courageous act that hasn't really been mirrored in US history since Lincoln during the Civil War. And so we've got Biden, and let's connect some dots here. Biden, who provided the Inflation Reduction Act to mass deploy clean energy to address the inflationary pressures of fossil fuels and to help to liberate both Ukraine and Europe from the yoke of potential oppression and, of course, in the case of Ukraine, genocidal invasion led by a bad actor petrostate. And so now there is a link. There's a link between the climate crisis, and the war on democracy, and that link is fossil fuels. And it's as clear as day. I don't know. Perhaps I am not connecting the dots as well as news professionals here. This is raw discussion of the issues here at the OBX Way Reports. But if someone wants to take this notion forward and even just not credit me, I am completely cool with it. But the links here are plain as day. As right now we have countries in Eastern Europe right dealing with inflation due to the bullying by bad actor states, Russia particularly, and other petrostates, putting the squeeze on Europe and enhancing extremism. And those same extremists, those same right-wing fascistic extremists that are rising up in Europe, same as the right-wing fascistic extremists here in the United States, they call themselves MAGA or QAnon. They all carry forward the same talking points. They all scream about inflation and then promote tyranny, and so they're just marching right in lockstep with the attempted leverage of energy by this bad actor dictator in the form of Putin to try and bring the West to its knees in his war of tyranny and dictatorship against free democracies. And this war is also a war on our climate system. It is a war that says, in which the dictators say, you can't get out of fossil fuel dependency. You have to rely on fossil fuels. And of course, just like so many other things, it is a lie. It is a denial of fact as they seek to deny the democracy and the freedom for Ukrainians and for the rest of us. They also seek to deny the liberation that is the clean energy revolution. So I'm going to put a really fine point on this. Mass deploying clean energy is a liberating force for the world. It is liberating from climate crisis, it is helpful for all those living on the earth, and it is liberating from bad actor tyrants like Vladimir Putin. So thank you for joining me for this OBX wave report. I did talk about President Carter and his vision and compassion yesterday, but I wanted to talk about why he was right and courageous, just as President Biden was courageous in his visit to Ukraine yesterday. So let's get down to weather and waves. And there is a lot to talk about when it comes to weather and waves today as well. Right now, across the United States, we see a building coast to coast storm system. And in the north, we've got a storm gathering in the northwest. This storm looks like it's going to be a major winter system with blizzard conditions across parts of the central US, central northern tier of the US. And this winter system is expected to produce severe weather, severe winter weather all the way from the US West Coast out here, Washington, Oregon, parts of Northern California, then all the way across the northern tier of the US and into the US Northeast. So major winter storm on tap for that region. Here in the south, we've got extreme heat building that over the next few days is expected to push temperatures into the 70s and 80s and possible 90s in some extreme southern locations, such as places like Texas or Florida. And so we've got these weather extremes going on. There's a climate fingerprint on this. We've got warmer than normal temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. In the sea surface temperatures, we got warmer than normal temperatures out here in the North Atlantic. These warmer than normal ocean temperatures are providing energy to this major storm system in the form of moisture, even as the instability comes down from the north. So we've just got this confluence, this clash of heat and moisture and cold and dry that is going on, and the heat and the moisture has been tamped up by human-caused climate change driven by fossil fuel burning. I did want to show you the wind monitors here for the US East Coast. So here in the Outer Banks, we're expected to see warmer than normal to much warmer than normal temperatures as we proceed throughout the week. Today, it's expected to be in the middle 60s for most of the Outer Banks, and then getting into the upper 60s tomorrow, and then into the 70s on Thursday. And for parts of the southeast, we might get temperatures in the 70s and 80s, in the upper 70s and even lower 80s inland. This could set off a spate of records. We could see a number of winter high temperature records fall from in a large swath running from Texas all the way through to the mid-Atlantic. So we'll just have to look at what the temperatures do over the next few days. But right now we've got a bit of a nor'easter up here off the US East Coast. We got, for the Outer Banks, we got southwest winds flowing across most of the Outer Banks, and the larger waves are here on the southern beaches with with smaller waves to the north. And I'm just going to go ahead and advance this wind model for you guys. Let's go ahead and just put a little point out here off of Cape Hatteras. So a nor'easter is expected to form off the US Northeast today and then head on out to sea later into tomorrow. And then a large high pressure system builds off the US East Coast, bringing in those warm, moist winds from the south, helping to fuel this major storm system. And I did just want to show you the confluence of air masses. Let's see. In this storm system, just look at these winds. So we got warm winds coming up from the south off the Gulf of Mexico, dredging up moisture from the warmer than normal Gulf of Mexico. We've got strong winds coming in from the southwest here, feeding in off the Pacific and feeding into this major storm system that is expected to develop today and tomorrow over the northern tier of the US. Massive frontal zone. You see this massive frontal zone stretching almost all the way across the country as multiple low pressure systems develop along this frontal boundary. And I also do want to show you the moisture feed into this. So here we've got a major flow of moisture coming up from the Gulf of Mexico feeding into the system, another flow of moisture coming in off the North Atlantic. So two major moisture feeds coming into the system here. This in association with a much warmer than normal air mass. So right now the story for the storm system is kind of a clash between hot and cold, but the hot side of this thing is amped up. And there's a little bit of a climate crisis fingerprint on this because of the warmer than normal ocean surface temperatures. And I do want to show you the warmer than normal ocean surface temperatures right now, which we will do. Let's look at the currents and sea surface temperature anomalies. Here we go. So we've got sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico ranging from about 1 degree Fahrenheit. There's a couple little spots there below normal, but for the most part, ranging from about 1 degree Fahrenheit to 5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for the Gulf of Mexico. And then here off the eastern seaboard, as we get out into the North Atlantic, ocean water temperatures in the range of about 1 degrees Fahrenheit in the cooler spots, maybe a couple of spots that are a little bit cooler than normal, but for the most part, warmer than normal, with sea surface temperatures ranging as much as 12 degrees Fahrenheit above normal out here in the North Atlantic, so just off the eastern seaboard. So a lot of energy out here in the form of moisture, and moisture provides energy for convection, which helps to feed storms. And this is more moisture and heat than we would typically have for the Gulf and East Coast region, and all that getting dredged up by a big high pressure system and hurled into a massive storm system that is spreading across the US right about now. And looking at the colder cloud tops, you can see the storm system starting to form here with the stationary front running in from New Mexico all the way east off the Outer Banks and feeding out into the North Atlantic here. Massive frontal boundary. And then the storm system that will combine with this frontal system coming in from the north and west. And I already did show you the moisture feed, so we don't really need to do that anymore. Looking at the National Weather Service radar picture and alerts, you can just see how the whole United States is lighting up like a Christmas tree right now, particularly for the winter storm advisories, running all the way from Northern California across Montana, Idaho, parts of the Dakotas, getting into Minnesota, and then running into the Great Lakes region. And this area of watches and warnings for winter storm event will shift to the east as the storm begins to move to the east. Here in the southeast, we mainly got some small craft advisories, a few scattered showers, and some heat advisories. And those heat advisories will tend to crop up more and more as we get into the day tomorrow and Thursday. For the waters off the U.S. northeast coast, it's worth noting that we've got another gale warning with another nor'easter that's developed offshore, and that one's going to track off to the north and east. And then for the quantitative precipitation forecast, we show just a broad swath of potential moisture in association with storms, the hot spots being the U.S. West Coast, which is expected to experience heavy precipitation events over the next week, and for a large swath running from, well, let's see, basically running along the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys north of Tennessee and Arkansas and east of Oklahoma and Nebraska, west of the Appalachians, so big, and south of the Great Lakes. So a big swath here. And off the US Northeast, a general tendency for storms to form. Okay, so we've talked a lot about weather events and a little bit about the interaction between fossil fuel burning and climate crisis as well as politics. We're going to get down to the coastline and talk waves. And right now on the Outer Banks, the waves north are small. And as you head south, the waves tend to get bigger. And then for the south facing beaches, that's where you get your decent waves. So for the north and east facing beaches, we've got 0 to 2 foot surf. And for our south facing beaches, we've got 3, 4, 5, maybe some 6 foot swells down in there. The swells just offshore are in the 7 foot range. So and with the southwest winds, some of those swells are translating to the coastline there in the south. So if you're looking for bigger waves, you need to go south to the south facing beaches. Right now at Jeanette's Pier, we have waves in the range of 1 foot, with a primary swell coming in at 8 seconds from the southeast and a secondary swell coming in at 8 seconds from the northeast. Winds are from the southwest at 13 miles per hour, which is a relatively gentle offshore flow. Air temperatures right now in the range of about 53 degrees. Ocean water temperatures about 50. The forecast for today is with spotty clouds and rain and an expected high of 65 degrees. And in between the clouds, we've got breaks in the clouds and sunshine. Right now, it's actually sunny right here in Manio, and I assume that that's the case down at Jeanette's Pier. Moving on down the coastline to Rodanth, we've got wave heights in the range of 1 to 2 foot, with a primary swell coming in at 9 seconds, a secondary swell coming in at 7 seconds, and winds out of the southwest, strong southwest winds at 23 miles per hour. That is an offshore flow. Air temperatures right now 61 degrees Fahrenheit, ocean water temperatures 55. And right now we've got intermittent clouds, some intermittent rain forecast, highs in the lower to middle 60s for Rodanth. And then going further down the coastline to Buxton, I'm going to go ahead and provide a report for Buxton, but we've got some caveats. So right now the monitors are saying that wave heights for Buxton are in the range of 2 to 3 feet. But what's happening is with those southwest winds, we've got a 6 foot swell offshore. So the swell is getting blown offshore. And the swell coming into shore right now is in the range of about 1 to 7 feet, with a primary swell coming in from the southeast. This is mostly a wraparound swell. So I've got an asterisk, but beside that 2 to 3 foot rating, it's more likely that the waves are closer to 2 foot at Buxton, maybe a little bit shorter than 2 feet. And with that southeast swell coming in at 8 seconds, we've also got a smaller northeast swell coming in at 8 seconds as well. Winds are out of the southwest at 22 miles per hour, which is an offshore flow there at Buxton. Air temperatures are 62 degrees. Ocean water temperatures warming up a bit from yesterday at 61 degrees. And we've got intermittent clouds and sun and some intermittent rain forecast today with an expected high of 66. And for our last location, I did want to get you guys some south-facing beaches. So we're going to go down to Billy Mitchell and give you guys a wave report for Billy Mitchell. At present, the wave monitors are showing waves in the range of 4 to 5 feet at Billy Mitchell. I've got an asterisk beside that because we've got a 7-second primary swell coming in from the southwest here. And that swell is a 7 foot swell. So some of that energy might be translating more into the coastline there. So 4 to 5 feet, maybe bigger down there at Billy Mitchell. Secondary swell coming in at 9 seconds as well. Winds are out of the west-southwest at 20 miles per hour. This is a cross and onshore flow. Air temperatures also about 61 degrees Fahrenheit, a little bit cooler than Buxton, and ocean water temperatures 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Expected high today at Billy Mitchell, also in the middle 60s. So that's our wave observations for the Outer Banks. The waves, of course, showing the influence of that westerly and southerly flow that is expected to dominate over the coming days here in the Outer Banks. And I did already show you the sea surface temperatures, so we don't really need to get into that. So let's talk broader weather. Not for some reason the Climate Prediction Center is not showing up today, so I can't really show you what NOAA's Climate Prediction Center is coming up with. Actually, let's see if NOAA is back up. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and use this for now. But Our last statement from the Climate Prediction Center showed that the U.S. Southeast over the next 8 to 14 days is expected to see above normal temperatures, and the U.S. West is expected to see below normal temperatures, with storminess tending to predominate in central California and running through the northern tier of the U.S., with another storm hotspot out here just south of the Great Lakes. What I do want to show you, however, is the forecast temperatures for the U.S. Southeast for today, tomorrow, and Thursday. And just look at these temperatures. Now, this is a 70-degree line, and we just have this huge swath of above 70-degree temperatures, possibly getting into the 80s and 90s in some locations over the next 3 days. So just look at today, and then Wednesday, the center of heat shifts in more toward the Gulf Coast region and toward Florida and to the US Southeast. And then as we get into the day on Thursday, we just get this huge bulge of heat running up through Pennsylvania and the US East out ahead of this winter storm, which gets crammed on up to the northern tier of the eastern US. So, big story with regards to heat for the southeast, as well as for a winter storm coming in. And National Weather Service is predicting major winter impacts for the northern tier of the US associated with this winter storm. And we are also getting a major heat wave. I guess I don't know if heat wave is the right word, but major winter heat event for the US Southeast. In addition to the winter storms, we do have some potential for thunderstorms to fire up along the boundary between hot and cold. And for today, we've got potential for thunderstorms running in from the desert southwest all the way up to the northeast, although not anything major showing up. And then for tomorrow's convected outlook, we have a slight potential for supercell, tornadic, straight line, powerful straight line, severe thunderstorms running in from Texas north and eastward toward Michigan and Indiana. So worth keeping a weather eye. And then for day 3, not as much in the way of severe weather. And looks like day 6, we might have some potential for severe weather in Oklahoma as well. So heat being a major issue, I'm going to go ahead and focus in on some potential high temperatures. And of course, these are coarse. But down here in South Texas, temperatures possibly getting up to around 90. This is on Thursday for Florida. Temperatures potentially in the upper 80s, possibly getting close to 90 for parts of central Florida as well. And these are coarse measures from the global forecast system model. Local temperatures are likely to peak out a bit higher, but look here, let's look how far north temperatures in the upper 70s go. So this is Washington, D.C. with possible high temperatures at 77 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. And out here in Richmond, temperatures in the upper 70s as well, getting into near the Raleigh region, potential upper 70s. We might see these temperatures break the 80-degree mark for a number of locations, which would be record readings for many locations this time of year. So we are likely to see a spate of record highs temperatures broken over the next 3 days as we get this warm wind, a big old high pressure dredging up heat and moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic and spreading it over the US Southeast. And I did want to show you this Weather Channel headline. Winter heat wave could smash February records. Okay, so they're calling it a heat wave at the Weather Channel, so I guess I can call it a heat wave as well. Check out the Weather Channel article that I just cited. So now we're going to get down into the global forecast system model. I do want to let you guys know that the long range global forecast system model is not picking up like bomb cyclone type events in early March, at least for this run. So hopefully that's the case. We did see some global forecast system runs pick up bomb cyclones for the central US and running in through the Great Lakes region. This is not in the models for today, so let's hope that remains the case. But nonetheless, the ingredients are there with that heat and moisture and warmer than normal ocean water temperatures driven by climate change, providing extra fuel for powerful storms. So we'll just have to keep a weather eye to things. I'm going to advance the models to show you this severe storm system gathering. So by later, actually early in the day on Wednesday, we've got two low pressure systems developing along the storm system boundary, a 985 millibar low over here in the desert southwest, and another low, this one 987 millibars over parts of Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma, North Texas area. And then as we advance into the day on Wednesday, the storm gathers and begins to sweep across the US. Looks like double barrel here with a 974 millibar low over the Rockies and another low here over Oklahoma. Looks like parts of the Mississippi River Valley running up toward the Great Lakes toward Minnesota. So just a very broad system. Just look at all this precipitation running from coast to coast here. And then gathering force as we get into the day on Thursday and further on into the day on Thursday, and then sweeping up toward the northeast and finally heading offshore as we get into the day on Friday. Worth noting that we've got persistent storms here out west over parts of California, and we might be seeing some big waves out there, so I'll check that out as well. All right, so looking at the wave monitors, I do want to give you guys a overview of wave conditions in the near offshore environment. We do have a southerly swell coming in just off the southern beaches. Looks like significant wave heights in the range of 5 feet. I did see a 7-foot swell in some of the monitors, but this model is showing a 5-foot swell. Most of the big waves are down here on the south-facing beaches. The north-facing beaches aren't getting much, even though we have relatively tall swell offshore. And as we get into the day tomorrow, overall the swell tamps down even further. So it does look like the waves are going to get smaller, particularly for the south beaches. We might get some wraparound swell on Wednesday, but it doesn't really look great for the wave picture on Wednesday across the Outer Banks. And then as we get into the day on Thursday, we get the southerly swell rising again to the 6 to 7 foot range. Once more, it looks like the south facing beaches on Thursday getting the best swell with not much here up to the north. And then into the day on Friday, swell becomes more confused. And it does look like Friday is the day for the swell to start to improve later in the day as we get a more northerly wind and northeasterly wind in association with a big old low pressure system developing off the US Northeast here. And then the wave picture just gets better as we get into Saturday and Sunday. So possible good waves this weekend, although things are expected to cool down considerably as a front passes and we get those northerly winds coming in on the backside of the front. I did want to show you just one more thing. Actually, hold on, two more things. Let's also talk waves for the US West Coast. So right now, waves for the US West Coast are pretty decent. Let's look at the southerly beaches. So not for the southerly beaches. So waves in the range of about 1 to 2 foot looks like for the southerly beaches, but for the central coast of California and moving on northward, waves in the significant wave heights in the range of 5 to 9 feet. But watch this impulse just move down the coastline by tomorrow. So really big wave event looks like for California with winds coming out of the northwest and swell coming out of the northwest. And even for Southern California, particularly as we get far into the south, looks like 14 to 15 foot significant wave heights. That's really massive. um, and here at the point, significant wave heights in the range of 19 to 20 feet. So might be a very big wave event for California over the next 24 to 48 hours with waves falling back down as we get into Thursday. But Wednesday looks like a really big wave day for California. hang 10 out there. You guys might enjoy it. All right, I did want to show you one more thing out here in the North Atlantic, and wow, we've covered all the things. And so we do have a large storm developing, expected to develop out here in the North Atlantic on Thursday. And I just want to show you this storm. I don't believe this is going to have too much of an impact on the other banks because we've got those south and west winds that are blowing the swell offshore. If there were less winds, we'd be having a major swell coming in here from the northeast, but we're not. um, but nonetheless, this storm is something to take a look at here as it fires up off of Newfoundland and joins in with a frontal boundary. Let's see. Let's just go to now. I'm just going to go ahead and advance this because it gets pretty powerful in the model here. At least maybe not as powerful as it was in the last run. I did see some near hurricane force winds in the last model, but looks like storm's not expected to be quite as strong with winds in the sustained winds in the 50-mile-per-hour range, but nonetheless a pretty strong storm. Let's look at the pressure. Yeah, so not as big of a storm as I saw in one of the previous models, but nonetheless a very powerful storm here off of Newfoundland. Unfortunately, with those westerly winds coming in and southerly winds coming in, it's pushing the swell offshore, and we're not going to see as much of a swell from this system as we would typically. All right, so thank you for joining me for this session of the OBX Wave Report, where we talk waves, weather, climate, beach lifestyle, and the need to mass deploy clean energy. And as I always do at the end of my videos, I ask you to do everything you can to please help accelerate the transition to clean energy being wind, water, solar, and electric vehicles, and clean energy being the primary solution right now to climate crisis driven by fossil fuel burning. Fossil fuel burning also being a primary enabler of inflation and a primary tool used by bad actor dictators like Vladimir Putin of Russia. So thank you for joining me again, and